Okay, good morning. Welcome everyone to the start of the Lewis County Cemetery Workshop. We are the Lewis County Historical Society. For those of you here in person, welcome to our house. This is the blue room of the old Masonic temple. My name is Jonathan Miller and I'm the president of the Lewis County Historical Society. I will be the one person today who's not making really substantive remarks. And I've been told to keep my remarks brief in terms of introductions. For any of you that know me, I could turn this into a week-and-a-half diatribe on all manner of things. We have people with hooks in the back that are going to come up here and pull me off of the stand if I don't keep to my required allotment of time. But I say welcome to the folks who are here in person. Welcome to the many people who are attending via Zoom. We are proud to put on the first of what is a two-day cemetery workshop. Today's program has an exceptional group of speakers, I think. And in a nutshell, it's really designed to address the concerns and the questions and the issues of a wide audience, both municipal officials, local cemetery trustees, cemetery caretakers, and those people who are interested generally in historic conservation and preservation of headstones and the like. It is, I will note, it's a free event, but our real purpose in doing this today is to disseminate practical advice and information and answer people's questions. For those of you who don't know, just briefly, the Lewis County Historical Society is Lewis County's official county historian. By mandate of the Lewis County Board of Legislators, and we thank them for that honor. Among the many hats that we wear and the many things that we do, one of them is a focus on cemeteries. We have a large collection of historical information on cemeteries here and information about new cemeteries. We continue to roll out new cemeteries in Lewis County as recently as this year, as I understand it. We are working on a Google map to pinpoint all of these cemeteries. Many are well known, and there are a few of them that you couldn't find it if you tried, unless we pinpoint it for you. We maintain a large collection of books and information here in our library on preservation practices. We are building a kit here that people can borrow to go out and clean headstones under certain terms and conditions. So we have the right brushes, we have the right cleaners. You'll hear more about that later today. And all of that is we keep here. And we also have a role in trying to attract and disseminate grants and other monies to cemeteries for maintenance and restoration purposes. To give you just a very rough sense, we have a little over 140 cemeteries here in Lewis County. And there probably are more that people have not yet found. These cemeteries are spread across all 17 of our towns. I think Frogan weighs in with the most at maybe like 14, and Montague the fewest with 2, but most towns have somewhere between 6 and 17 cemeteries, and they run the gamut. We have roughly 22 not-for-profit association, New York State regulated cemeteries in Lewis County. We have a number of cemeteries that are owned and maintained by the town and run as an active cemetery. We have a number of religious, church-related cemeteries that are active cemeteries. And the rest are a combination of large, small, kind of in use. I would say some abandoned, but never yet taken over by a town, and some, the real roots of them are really hard to know. I think started as religious cemeteries, morphed into public cemeteries, and are now out in the middle of a woodlot. So we've got cemeteries here with veterans from the Revolutionary War, from the War of 1812, from the Civil War, and I think most all conflicts since. We've got headstones in some of these cemeteries that are municipal headstones. I don't yet, frankly, know whether we have headstones that are federal headstones, but they have a program where they put headstones for veterans and service members out in cemeteries. And we even have a couple of cemeteries where reputedly the remains of indigenous or Native American people reside. Anyway, today's program grows out of our being here and getting questions from a wide variety of people, some of which, frankly, we just haven't been in any position to answer. And that's why we have tried to assemble today a group of people, I'll talk about them in just a moment, who should be, hopefully are, maybe in a position to answer some of those questions. Before we start, let me just dole out a couple of quick thank yous, particularly to the Lowville Rural Cemetery Association. This is a great group of people. If you don't know them, they've been very good and helpful. The caretakers up there for the program that we're doing this weekend, actually demonstrating and showing conservation and restorative techniques. They've been just, you guys, and a number of them are here. Thank you very much for that. For the New York State Division of Cemeteries that regulates certain cemeteries, and we have a speaker here today for that. Thank you to them. And last but not least is the Tug Hill Commission. I don't know if any of you know the Tug Hill Commission. It's a non-regulatory state agency with all manner of responsibilities for the Tug Hill Plateau and the myriad of towns that touch the Tug Hill Plateau. But as a practical matter, they're just great, good, and decent people. We've been working with them on a variety of things. They bend over backwards. They're very helpful. They've made all this technology work. If it doesn't work, blame me, but they've been really, really helpful to us. Great group of people. Now, to get on briefly to our speakers today, I'll introduce them at the get-go, and then we can roll through them. We have several very, very good speakers. The first up will be Peter Hayes. Peter, you may know, is the curator of Constable Hall. If you don't know that and haven't been to Constable Hall, by all means, go there. You may know him as the village historian of Constableville or the town historian of West Turin. Turin? Yeah, Turin. And I always get the southern part of the county confused. But he's here today because he's a trustee of the Constableville Cemetery and probably has and will go through many of the issues and questions that people in that position have. Next up, after him, will be David Fleming. David is appearing via Zoom. David is many things. He's the chief operating officer of a law firm in Albany that probably has the largest cemetery consulting practice anywhere around. He represents and advises many cemeteries. He's part of the New York Association of Cemeteries. He's been a town supervisor. He's actually been a trustee, maybe still remains one, of a cemetery. But this is what I hear about him. Everybody that I talk to about cemetery issues says to me, go talk to David Fleming. He's the guy that knows everything about cemeteries. Now, that's probably built him up more than he will want, but we have found that to be true, and I hope his presentation, he will be speaking about abandoned cemeteries and municipal responsibilities. Next up is Cindy Craig. She's around here someplace. She will be from the Division of Cemeteries. Cindy has been an investigator with the Division of Cemeteries for, I would give you the number, but that's with a woman, you just don't put numbers on things. She's done it for a long time. And I have found her incredibly helpful and responsive every time we have an issue that we need to address, and particularly in connection with this. And last up, and by no means least, is Joe Farinini. And Joe Farinini comes from Gravestone Matters. He's a conservation headstone conservationist, and somewhat similar to David Fleming. Every time I hear somebody talking about, well, who can you get to talk about actually restorative techniques or appear and demonstrate them, everybody goes, Joe Farinini. He's not over there, but he's back here. And we have found him to be a great guy. He's been up to Lowville Rural Cemetery. He's already got things up. He has a great amount of practical information and advice. And again, that is really the purpose of today, to be able to ask people, answer people's questions. What can I do in a cemetery? Can I lift this stone? What do I have to do before? How do I do it? What do I do with an abandoned cemetery? What cemeteries, all of that kind of stuff. And before I get started, just a couple of housekeeping events for people here. Out the back door and to the door right here and to the left, there are 2 bathrooms. For nobody's that had it, there's coffee out in front, Danish and any of that. We will be doing a lunch. Some of you brought your own lunch. We will have food that any of you can have. If you didn't sign up coming in, there's a sign up sheet. Please sign your name so that we know you were here. There's a donation box for lunch or anything like that. We're a nonprofit. We don't have lots of, feel free to drop $10. I mean, if you got $10,000 in your pocket, feel free to drop that. Into. I don't mean to limit that anyway. So without further ado, I'd like to turn this over to my good friend and the trustee of the Constableville Cemetery, Peter Hayes. I only ran 1 minute over too. It's very easy.
All right, my name is Peter Hayes. I'm the icebreaker for this presentation. In other words, I'm going to ask the questions that I have found that are important to me as a cemetery trustee. And I've tried to organize them so that they're typical questions and that there may be questions that you have already in the back of your mind. So my job is to throw them out on the table. So my presentation, I'm not trying to answer any of these questions. I'm just trying to get them out there so that you can start to think about your own questions. And as Jonathan said, this workshop was all designed around that notion that people have questions, people who are involved in cemeteries have questions. Let's try to get some answers. Now, I've organized it into 3 categories. So back one, please. Governance, maintenance, and conservation. Governance, I mean, just how to operate the cemetery. That's what I mean by governance. Maintenance is one of our biggest duties are to maintain the cemetery. And I have questions associated with that. So I'm going to throw those out there. And finally, conservation. There's for the older cemeteries, they just have a lot of issues, and we are things broken, things that are time is decaying, and we want to have best practices. All right, so that you could advance one, please. Oh, I can run that.
It's stubborn sometimes.
Just to provide context for my questions, I want to explain very briefly who I am and what our cemetery is, because that context animates my questions. This might look like your cemetery or might not. So I just want to go through that very briefly. I have been a trustee almost 10 years at Constableville. I became a trustee for probably the same reason that most of you did. An oldster passed away, and I lived right across the road from the cemetery, and they said, you. So I knew nothing. I knew nothing about what the Cemetery Association should do. I just got assigned and went in there. And it turns out that almost everybody else on the trustees was new, and none of us really knew the lay of the land. Now, the cemetery is in Constableville. That's in southern Lewis County. It's right across the road from my house. It's a village cemetery, meaning that when the village was founded, the cemetery started. So it's not connected with the church. It's mainly Protestant, but that was just the nature of the settlement. It's 220 years old. So therefore, I would call that an old cemetery, but it's still active. We enter about 4 persons per year. But Constableville was 3 or 4 times the size of that in years past. So there were the rate of interment was much higher in the mid to late 1800s. So as you look across the cemetery, about 1,800 interments, most of them are from the mid to late 1800s. Again, I would call that an old cemetery. It's active, but as I walk into it, everything feels like you're in the 1800s. It was converted into the rural style during the 1800s, and what's important about that is it has big trees, a lot of big trees, and those are the source of a lot of our maintenance issues, are the tree system. There is a cemetery association that manages the cemetery. We don't know when it started, around 1900, as far as anybody can tell. I did locate the original booklet, and it talked about maximum speed of horses that could go in a cemetery. So but there's no date on that. We have no records for the first 100 or 120 years of the cemetery. Nothing, zero. So everything that we know about it was reverse engineered during the 1900s. It is a regulated cemetery, so that's part of the context. Jonathan said there are about 22 in Lewis County. We are one of them. Okay, so let's jump into the issues. And we'll start with governance. Okay, there we go. And it starts out with the basics. We are a cemetery association. I joined. I didn't know what exactly is the role of a cemetery association. Well, some of the obvious answers is we're supposed to mow the lawn, I guess. Keep the driveway working, trim some bushes, make sure people don't trip and fall as they walk through the cemetery. So that, from our standpoint, that's kind of what we interpreted, but we didn't really know, or at least I didn't know. I should make it about me. I didn't really know exactly what are we responsible for. Now, this is a regulated cemetery. You may be here representing other types of cemeteries, and that does not have a cemetery association with it. So therefore, you would have the same question, but it would be answered a little differently. So I think I was on a trustee for at least 3 years before I'd even heard of the Division of Cemeteries. And I did a lot of cold calling to get people to come to this event. And I've heard that a lot. Are we regulated? Who is the Division of? So it's not, I plead ignorance that I did not know for several years that the Division of Cemetery even existed. But I don't think I'm the only one. So how did I find out about them? Well, we had a stone, remember I'm across the road, big monument fell over. The family of that monument crowded into my kitchen and yelled at me about that I had to go fix that monument. And so I talked to the other trustees, are we supposed to lift that thing up? I talked to my good friend Steve, and it's like $1,100 or something to get that thing pulled up. So I said, all right, so I'll call these people in Syracuse. I did hear, we do file financial reports. So I called up Division of Cemeteries. I think it was Joe Ambrose was the guy that I talked to out of the Syracuse office. And he says, no, you're not responsible for doing that. It's the lot owner, the family. So I said, oh, okay. The answer bothered me a little bit because it looks ugly. I can see it from my kitchen, this monument. So I told the people, and they were really unhappy with that. But I had my friend Steve give them the quote, and then they went away. But it left the question, still flopped over. But it left the question of, where does that responsibility boundary really lie? So that's when I began to appreciate the Division of Cemeteries. At least I could say, get out of my kitchen, call them. So it provided cover, if you will, for me. So the relationship to Division of Cemeteries or regulated cemeteries is really important. But I have a question, if you're a non-regulated, are there still some of the laws still apply that show up? So I'll leave that in. All answers are other people. I'm just asking questions. Now we do, as far as being a regulated cemetery, we do, I think, do all the correct things. We do annual report. We post our rules and regulations, and they're all consistent with the regulations, we believe. We have the required meetings. I think we're doing it right, but I'm not 100% sure, to tell you the truth. There's a lot of stuff on that website. And we do keep records, but I'd be interested in knowing what are best practices. The one area that we struggle with is lot deeds. In other words, when we sell a lot, we sell it to somebody. That's a lot owner. And there's a deed that's associated with that. We don't have those deeds. They never kept the copy. I don't know why. We have 0 copies of any deeds until about starting 2 years ago. So that's an issue. So when I look across the cemetery, a fundamental question is, who are the lot owners? We have no idea. I would say 80%, we have no idea who's the lot owner. Maybe 10% I do because they're recent people, or I know somebody who could tell me. And 10, maybe we could figure it out. So if the answer to any of my questions is go talk to the lot owner, I say, I'm stuck. I have no idea who the lot owner is, because we don't have those records. We're keeping them now, but as I said, it's 220 years old. The first 100 or 120 years, as I said, we have no documentation whatsoever. I answer no questions. Basically, because we have an expert sitting right behind you. So I would please like to defer the answer to that. That's a good question. Excellent question, Charlotte, but I'm going to pass on trying to answer that. But records, deeds, records and interments, locations within a lot, we have only partial records for that. But again, this would be good for everybody to know. This is a nice form to fill out. We have pretty good financial record keeping. But again, if there's some best practices, that would be nice to know. We've reverse engineered the maps of our lots. That's we found very important, but it's been a real struggle trying to get, a set of documentation that we can use to go forward. What can we require of the lot owners? Turns out we do not have a lot owner's policy. Can we update something in there, because to help explain our relationships would be a nice thing to do. And are there some good examples or templates of what we can expect a lot owner to do? Do they have to maintain the plantings? Do they have to trim the bushes? If there's an issue with the lot, what are they responsible for? But to wind up on governance, I have to emphasize the last, and that's practical constraints that we have. We have 2. One is money. We fortunately have a small endowment, but very small. We don't use any of it because it's so small. We're trying to build it up. So everything revolves around money, what we can do and what we can't do. So money is a huge issue, huge constraint. We now have a balanced budget. It was a real struggle to get to a balanced budget, but so many things we would like to do, we just can't. And the other constraint is, and I'm sure this is very common, is people. Trying to get people to be on the trustees. All right, everybody's interested. Everybody cares. How you get them to show up on a Saturday to actually do something is another matter. But also the lawn, who mows the lawn? I mean, it's just an enormous challenge trying to get staff to actually maintain it. And I've heard this from other cemeteries. So, as far as the real practical constraints that underpin running a cemetery, the money and who's going to do it. Everybody likes it. Everybody's has a mom plant buried some place, but trying to get the time. No. Maintenance. Really, I'm just going to focus on a couple things here. Should I run my little clicker there to get to the next slide?
It's giving me some stubbornness.
Maintenance. Goes back to what I was saying. What must we do as the cemetery association as far as maintenance? As I said, I think we mow the grass and everything, but we get to a gray area like the trees. Well, are they trees on the lot or trees in the cemetery? And which ones are we responsible for? what happens when an interment collapses, it becomes a hazard to walk through? Well, we take care of that. I don't know if we're supposed to or not, but we're going to twist somebody's ankle if we don't. Where is the boundary switch over to the lot owners? Are they supposed to do all the cleaning and the repairing of the monuments? Are they supposed to trim the bushes around it? Some of the bushes are so huge that the lawnmower guy runs into. We trim them. I don't know if we're supposed to or not, but we have to. We have a lot of signs that say perpetual care. Little metal signs, you may have seen those. I have no idea what those are. Where did those come from? I think in the 1900s, early 1900s. There's a general feeling of people that does perpetual care, or everything is perpetual care, that we as the association will take care of everything perpetually. Well, that's a long thing. And I don't know what it means. I don't know where those little signs came. They slowly have been hit by lawnmowers and have disappeared or underneath the dirt. There was some hint that they had a subscription service in the early 1900s that you paid $1.50, and then they would trim your lot with probably a little push mower. I guess that's what it is, but we have no documentation. But it's left an impression of people that we're supposed to take care of everything. So, I don't think there's anything at the state level that defines it. I think it's a cemetery level. But anyway, that's another one of my questions. And the last thing we have not had a problem with vandalism recently, but I know a lot of cemeteries do. And that hopefully is if you have questions along vandalism, how the vandalism fund works, it's a good place to ask it. All right, and my last slide here is conservation issues. And this really brings back to the hub of a lot of what I've been talking about, is that we don't know where the boundary is between the association and this fabled lot owner, which is, as I said, impossible to determine for most of the lots in our cemetery. I'll give you one example. The Higbee is an old family here in Lewis County. There are lots of Higbee monuments over in my cemetery that are in bad shape. There are probably hundreds of Higbee descendants in Lewis County and tens of thousands across the country. To try to determine who owns that Higbee stone is effectively impossible. All right, so the monument is dirty. Can we clean it or not? Do we have to try to find this fabled lot owner or not? It's tipping, all right? Can we straighten it or not? Okay, it's not a hazard, but it's an eyesore. All right, it gets to about there. That's a hazard. I mean, we're going to hurt the lawnmower guy or somebody else walking in the cemetery. Yes, there is a program in New York State, certain monuments under certain, you can write a grant, which we've never had the time to do, to help straighten those stuff. But that only applies to certain stones. All right, well then, bam, down they go. Now they're not a hazard anymore, but then you can't see them. And that doesn't look good. Does not look good for a cemetery. We have some stones that are broken. Are we allowed to repair those? He tracks me too. I'll close with that issue. I don't know where the boundary is. That's my big question. But the reason it's so important is that we have two sources of income: donations and lot sales. That's it. Everything else is inconsequential. If you are going to buy a lot and you come to my cemetery and you see eyesores and tip stuff all over the place, why would you buy a lot in our cemetery? It looks like the devil. You wouldn't do it. So the other one would be donations. If the cemetery looks like it can't get its act together and clean it up and make it look nice, you're not going to be inclined to give money. So therefore, this is important for us, for our financial stability, to make the cemetery decent. I mean, we have ethical and moral responsibilities, but this is just a financial one. We have to make the cemetery look respectable, or that puts us into a negative spiral. And so that's why it's important that we know what we can do, what we can't do, how should we do it, etc. And I think that winds up my questions. I'll just say that there are other things other than stones. We have iron fences, burial vaults, iron lots. If we get to any of that, I would be interested. We could go to the last slide, please. And I'll just wind up here with pictures from my cemetery, not my cemetery, though. Cemetery across the road from my, but you see exactly what I'm talking about. There's a big honking tree up in the upper left, tipping over a monument, tipped and dangerous ones, a dented fence that somebody's manure wagon ran into, broken stones, tip stones, etc. That's what we face. All right, that's the end of my questions.